Good morning and welcome back to the program. We're so glad to have you with us here again in the Always Go Forward. It's another beautiful Friday here in Cebu, and I hope all of you are doing well, safe, and fine. Thank you again for always joining us. And just a small favor that we've always been asking from you, if you can share this with your friends, share this with your ISO team, share this with your organization. Help us grow this advocacy. We would like to extend this small service of ours to as many people as we can who are in this same path that we're taking. And that's, of course, promoting, implementing, and reaping benefits out of management system, whether that's quality, environment, health, safety, information security. Again, the topic for today is, of course, understanding risk assessment techniques. All right, it's risk assessment techniques. So we're basically going into the granular level of this practice, which is risk management. And take note that risk management, of course, is ISO 31, while this one is ISO 3110. So just notice the coding numbers there. Okay. So the codification for your guidance there. So today we're going to talk about risk assessment techniques. Now, we're not going to really scrutinize all the risk assessment techniques because there's quite a lot actually. There are a lot of risk assessment techniques found in ISO 3110. So the objective here is for you to identify what are these assessment techniques, and most importantly, how do they function? Where are you going to use them? In which part of your risk management are you going to use these risk assessment techniques? So, okay, no, but before that, for just a quick review here again, for the past many weeks that we've been together, we've covered internal audits, and now we're transitioning to risk management system, moving toward the next couple of weeks. So just to make sure that we complete your implementation of your quality management system. Again, we presented this last week, so just take note of this. ISO 31 2018 is the risk management guidelines, all right? So this basically contains what are your guidelines in implementing risk management, all right? Today, we're going to talk about the IEC 3110, right? IEC 3110 2019, which is the risk assessment techniques. You can see that on the second row there. So that's the topic that we're going to cover today. And as already mentioned, your risk assessment is actually found in Clause 6, which is planning. So this is again your PDCA cycle diagram in your ISO 9001 2015. So we just wanted to make sure that the integration part is clear here. So you integrate your risk management in Clause 6, which is planning. And diving deeper into planning, you have seen this last week. This is Clause 6 planning. And in Clause 6.1, it says there, we need to determine the risk and opportunities covered by your quality management system, whether it's QMS, EMS, OSHAS, or information security management system. We have to identify the risk and opportunities. And so we refer back to Clause 4.1, we go back to Clause 4.2, because again, your context or your SWOT and your interested parties matrix basically are sources of risk. All right, so that's where you identify the risk. So risk management starts with identification. We all know that. And where do we identify this risk? We go back to Clause 4.1 and to Clause 4.2 of your management system. So are we clear on this? No questions. All right. So the first point I'd like to just really emphasize here is that risk management, okay, or risk management guidelines, which is in ISO 31, can be integrated here in Clause 6. All right. So we integrate your risk management, which is ISO 31, which is a different ISO standard from that of your ISO 9001, and you integrate it here in Clause 6. Okay, now that's clear. Today, we're going to take a look at the different risk assessment techniques. Now that we understand what the risk assessment is, this is basically the risk assessment, the risk management process. So you identify the risk, you assess, you control the risk, and then of course you review the effectiveness of the controls, right? Today we're going to dive a little deeper. What are these different risk assessment techniques? Because there's just so many. So maybe you already are using a few of these risk assessment techniques. All right, so let's continue. Now, first things first, we need to categorize these techniques. All right. Now, for us to effectively categorize these techniques, we need to understand the different characteristics of these techniques. Let me just pull up my annotation here again. Do I have that? Okay, I think it's not there. No worries. So, first things first, look at this. All right, take a look at this. So, maybe you can take your smartphone and take a screenshot of this for your reference. And if you look at that, we have to first understand the different characteristics of techniques here. Okay, so take note that there are so many different risk assessment techniques, which is, like I said, contained in IEC 3110, so which basically supports the ISO 31, which is the risk management. Don't be confused with all these numbers. So first things first, let's look at how do we digest this table here. So if you look at this part, first part here, characteristics, you look at that. Characteristics basically cover the application, the scope, the time horizon, decision level, starting info, specialist expertise, qualitative, quantitative, and effort to apply. Why is this important? Now, it's important because you need to understand, first things first, how and when do you apply the techniques, all right? When you apply the risk assessment technique, what is the scope of this technique? Will it cover organization level or a specific department or a very specific process? Did you get that? So, and of course, you also look at the time horizon. Is this risk assessment technique good only for short-term risk, medium-term risk, or long-term risk? What about the decision level? You take a look at the fourth row there. Who's involved in the decision-making process here? Would that be, is this a strategic decision? Is this tactical, or is this operational? And what about the level of expertise we need to have here? Are we going to undergo training for like 1 day, 2 days, or more than that, just for us to really master this assessment technique? Are you getting this? Is this risk assessment technique a qualitative approach or a quantitative kind of assessment? And what about the effort in the application of this technique? Will it be time consuming? Will it also require funding, or small fund, or no fund at all, or a large amount of fund? Did you get that? So these are again the important elements we need to understand in choosing what risk assessment techniques are we going to implement. Okay, so again, just to emphasize, application scope, time horizon, up to effort to apply. Now, if you look at the description of these different elements under the characteristics, look at that. When we say application, it's how the technique is used in risk assessment. Okay, so if you recall earlier, the different processes involved in your risk management is identify risk, step 1. Step 2 is assess risk. Step 3 is come up with the RTP or risk treatment plan. And step 4 is review the effectiveness of the RTPs. Now, we need to understand where are we going to apply these techniques in those 4 steps in the risk management process. And then, of course, the last column there looks at the details, no? or what are feature indicators. So for example, is this technique, is this going to elicit views or comments, inputs, insights from the participants? Or is this used to identify a risk? Is this used to analyze a risk or analyze the cost? Or is this technique used to analyze controls as well? Are we following? All right, so take note, you have seen the characteristics there. You have seen the description of those elements under the characteristics, and of course, some details there. So let's just pick one here. Let's say this one, this element, application. So application obviously is out of the so many risk assessment techniques, we need to understand where do we apply that, right? So it's written there, how the technique is used in risk assessment. I'll go further down the line there. Don't worry, I'll explain that. And then we'll also need to understand whether the technique is used to elicit views, to identify a risk, or to analyze a cost. And then what else? So let's take a look at this, another element here. What about the scope? Does this risk assessment technique apply to organizational level, a specific department, or a very specific process? Yes, that is correct. All these different risk assessment techniques has its purpose, because you cannot just use one risk assessment technique that you're going to apply for the organization, or you're going to just apply it for a particular process. I always recall the saying, excuse me for that. If you only have one tool, for example, if you only have a hammer in your hand, you basically look at everything else as a nail, right? Do you get that? Because the only tool you have is a hammer. So everything looks like a nail for you. But that's not the case here in risk management. In risk management, which is part of your QMS, there are different risk assessment techniques that you should use in risk management. So if you're assessing risk in a process, the tool is different. If you're assessing organizational risk, which is enterprise-wide, the tool should be different. If you're identifying risk from a departmental level, try to also consider looking at an applicable, suitable risk assessment technique for that. So there's no like one assessment technique tool fits all. Are you following this? Okay. Now let's take a look at the time horizon. Look at this, the time horizon. The scope, then you have the time horizon there. So each of these risk assessment techniques, they follow different time horizon. Some risk assessment techniques may be short term, while others would take more than 3 months maybe to implement, because you have to gather data and all that. Okay, so understand this. That each risk assessment tools or techniques, whatever you call it, of course, will be used in different situations, in different times, in different contexts within your risk management system. So are you following this so far? So these are the characteristics of techniques. Again, let me repeat that. You have application, scope, time horizon, the decision level. What about the starting information? Do we need to gather enough data before we can start with the risk assessment? What about the specialist expertise, qualitative, quantitative, and an effort to apply? Remember these different characteristics of techniques so that we can categorize the techniques. All right? Clear so far? Moving on. So I just sampled application scope and time horizon there. Okay. Now, so you have seen that. Okay. This is just again the characteristics. Okay. Now take a look at this characteristics, right? So you're familiar with that already. Now I'm going to show you some sample risk assessment tools now. All right. So let's dive straight to the risk assessment tools there. There's quite a lot, by the way. So, and then we're going to evaluate or categorize these risk assessment tools according to characteristics. Clear? Okay, here we go. So these are sample risk assessment techniques. Look at this. These are different risk assessment techniques. So maybe you can, some of them are quite familiar with you already. I hope you're watching this in a laptop or an LCD screen, not in a cell phone, because it's quite small. So I lifted this from the guideline, by the way. So maybe you have seen business impact analysis. Now, where can we find the characteristics? Look, this is the characteristic. Right? These are the characteristics. So I'm highlighting it again. These are the characteristics. So take note of that. We have covered that earlier in the previous slides, right? So now these are on this column here. These are the different risk assessment tools. So maybe some are familiar to you, some are new. So in this webinar, I'm not going to cover all this one by one, all right? So we'll probably cover this in our succeeding webinars. But look at this. Maybe some of these are familiar with you already. What about business? Are you using business impact analysis in your risk management? All right, maybe you have used it already, maybe you haven't. But business impact analysis is used to analyze consequences, okay, of disruptive incident on the organization. So let me ask you this question. Earlier, we said that the different risk assessment tools, they have their unique application. Some can be used for a specific process. Others can be used effectively in a departmental level, while some tools are used across the enterprise or the organization. My question here for you is this. Is the BIA or Business Impact Analysis a tool that you use for what level? Is it for process? Is it for department? Or is it for enterprise-wide? What do you think? Is it there? Is it stated there? All right, look at that. Look at that. So I think there's a cue there that says process that analyzes the consequences of a disruptive incident in the organization. So if you're looking at risk organization-wide, you use this business impact analysis. Okay, so the scope is of course number one. Are you following this? So enterprise, thank you for that input there, Ma'am Gemma from St. Therese. Yeah, so this is enterprise-wide. All right, so you understand that. So again, because in your QMS, when you do your risk management, when you do your risk identification assessment, you look at, again, let me just emphasize this, process risk, department risk, organization or enterprise-wide risk. So if you wanted to understand what are risks that can probably affect the organization, then you might want to use the business impact analysis. So because this determines as well not only the disruptive incidents, but it also determines the recovery priorities of your company, including the organization's products and services, thereby the priorities of the activities and resources which deliver them. So it analyzes the consequence, it also analyzes the controls. So are we following? No. So again, let me just go back to that. Right here, look at this. So you have the scope. Is it organization, project, department, or equipment? So in this case, the score there is 1 because the tool is used in an organization level. All right. So that's why you see there it's 1. So when you see 1, it's organizational level. So business impact analysis, you use this particular tool all across the organization. The time horizon is not too long, it's short. The decision level is tactical, all right? It doesn't need so much information, maybe just medium amount of information. Specialist expertise, we don't need that longer than maybe three days of training there because it's low and it gives you quantifiable and qualitative data. Effort to apply is medium. Did you get that? So that's how you choose. That's how you decide which particular risk assessment technique are you going to use when you're doing your risk identification or assessment. Are we following so far? All right, so stay with me here. Let's take a look at more risk assessment tools. No? So I just lifted this again from the IEC 3110. So again, these are more risk assessment techniques. Look at this. Look at that. So from checklist down to the Delphi technique. So maybe some of these you're already using, others are quite new for you. So let me know, which of these techniques are you already using in your respective QMS? Please feel free to write in your group chat. I'd like to know. Go to your group chat. Which of these techniques have you already been using in your QMS or EMS or your ISMS? Or maybe you haven't used any of these at all. And take note that each of these risk assessment tools have their corresponding, applicability. All right, let me know. Are you using any one of this? Maybe none. Okay, no answers yet in the group chat. So maybe you're not. Oh, okay. From Butuan City, they're using consequence likelihood matrix. Thank you, Ma'am Lily. All right, very good. So that's consequence likelihood matrix is actually used in any level. Look at that. The scope, any level, meaning you can use it for process risk analysis, department risk analysis, or enterprise risk analysis. Is that clear? So very good. So, and then of course, maybe you're familiar with decision tree analysis. Okay, so I can see CMI here. Maybe CMI is using decision tree analysis. So you can also use decision tree analysis across the different levels in your organization, and all the different information there in terms of decision level, time horizon, the amount of information you need, the level of expertise are all there. These are characteristics of this specific risk assessment tool. Okay, moving on. Like I said, you will be introduced to different risk assessment techniques in this webinar, although we're not going to dive deeper into each one. There's just a lot of them. Okay, maybe in the succeeding webinar. So look at this. Which of these are you using? If you may be kind enough to share in the group chat, which of these tools are you using? Are you using game theory? Maybe some of you are using HACCP already or HAZOP, or have you heard of HRA, the Human Reliability Analysis? And of course, I would like to assume that in most of your QMS, you're using this, FMEA, right? Isn't this, or from CMI Lapu-Lapu, FME, yeah, the failure mode and effects analysis. So this is actually very common. This is common in risk management. As a matter of fact, when you review the risk management procedure of a certified company, more often than not, they're following the failure mode and effects analysis, or the failure modes and criticality analysis. All right, so this is very common. But mind you, take note of this. This is a wrong notion. People would always say, okay, if it's risk management, that's the standard tool is FMEA. It's not the case. All right, it's not the case. It's not always the case. Mind you, there's so many risk assessment techniques here that you can use, that you can integrate, apply in your risk management. So in failure modes and effects analysis, like you've already known, you're using criteria like severity, okay, the detection or the likelihood of the risk after you have identified this, and then you rank them. You come up with risk priority number. That's very common across the different risk management in your QMS. Take note of this. There's also HRA, which is the human reliability analysis. We all know that risk can come from different sources in your organization. It can be process related, it can be enterprise-wide related, it can be linked to the reliability of your suppliers or the quality of the components of the parts, or how do you effectively monitor the quality of the service. The risk can come from anywhere. And we cannot deny the fact that the human resource, all right, or the process owner can also be your source of risk. And then if you use FMEA for that, maybe it's still okay. But a rather more applicable, suitable risk assessment tool there is your HRA, by the way, or the human reliability analysis. So what is this? It's a set of techniques for identifying the potential for human error. And not only that, it guides you as well in identifying the likelihood. You can estimate the likelihood of the failure, all coming from human error. So it's a specific tool just for looking and analyzing at mistakes mostly made by the process owner. So we call it sometimes behavioral, right? If it has nothing to do with the process, it has nothing to do with the system or the procedure, the layout or the structure, it has nothing to do with the plan, it has nothing to do with the communication protocols, and yet we still have non-conformities or non-conforming outputs and products, then most likely it is human related or behavioral, or an unsafe act, an unsafe behavior, hence you have a risk for accidents. Okay, so you can analyze it further by using HRA, or of course you have their interviews and so on and so forth. Okay, moving on. What else? So please take note of all of these different tools. Okay, now look at this. Which of these tools are you using in your risk management? I can see some very familiar tools here, while others may be quite new for you. Like for example, LOPA. Have you heard of LOPA? Layers of Protection Analysis. Are you using that? Or the Markov analysis? Or RCM. So if you have RCM, which is root cause analysis, you also have RCA, root cause analysis. You also have RCM, which is the reliability-centered maintenance that you use as a risk-based assessment, especially for your equipment, for example. All right. Now, let me just, as usual, highlight some of the things here that we commonly use in our organization. Of course, Ishikawa, right? So you use your Ishikawa analysis or your fishbone diagram, which identifies contributory factors to a defined outcome. So we use that. We're using that. And look at that. When can we use Ishikawa diagram? Look at the scope. You can use it in any levels of your respective organization, whether it's process-related, departmental level, or enterprise-wide. Okay, time horizon any, it can be short, medium, or long. Decision level, it can be strategic, tactical, or operations. The starting information or the data that we need before we can start this is also low. So it doesn't require a lot of data gathering before we can, start using the Ishikawa analysis or fishbone diagram. That's why it's popular. It's easy to use as well. But try to explore the other tools mentioned here. If you'd like to, for example, make a decision between different options, maybe you can use the MCA or the multi-criteria analysis. If you're faced with different options, like what risk treatment protocols are you going to apply, or what sort of risk strategy are you going to implement, you have some options, then maybe you can look at multi-criteria analysis as a tool there. Okay, so just take a quick photo of that, so you can have at least a reference of what these tools are. Of course, Pareto Charts, we're familiar with this. So I'm just highlighting these commonly used tools here. The Pareto Principle of 80-20, where we develop Pareto diagrams. It's understanding significance of data, for example, where we focus on the vital few, which is that of, let's say, the 20% vital few, which brings 80% impact, instead of focusing our efforts, allocating resources to the 80% trivial many. Are you following that? So we focus on the vital few, which is the 20%. That's Pareto Charts. So again, you can also use this tool across the different layers of your organization, whether it is process level, department level, or across the organization. Okay, moving on. So Pareto charts, Ishikawa diagram, these are very commonly used in your respective organizations. Only that, look at that. The starting info, the data there, look, it's medium, it's not low, right, for Pareto charts. So you cannot just easily right away use it like the Ishikawa diagram. You can just gather your team and draw the fishbone diagram. But for the Pareto chart or the Pareto analysis, look, the information you need there might be quite significant. All right, not that high, but again, medium. For example, you'd like to understand why for the last 3 months your tardiness rating has gradually increased. All right. For example, your all of a sudden 80% of your workforce are late coming to work. No? We understand that little by little we are going back to the workplace from work from home. So when you use Pareto charts, you can identify what are causes of this. For example, let's say what are causes of, tell me in the group chat, please. Why are people late coming to work? Anyone in the group chat? Let me know. Let's share your thoughts here. I think sometime in the past you were late going to work. Then maybe you know the reason, right? So low employee involvement. Okay, galing kay Ma'am Joanne. That's okay. Let's do a Pareto analysis here. Demotivated. Okay, ano pa yan? Okay, here we go. Okay, or overtime, sabi ni Sir Michael Ferraren. Or traffic, poor time management. Okay, ano pa? So these are all causes, no, of familial obligation, sabi ni AJ Soriano. Proximity, according to Sir Dionisio. There's so many sources, causes of this. Some family-related problems, name it. Okay, we have so many. So when you do Pareto analysis, you have to identify all of these categories, all sources of problems, and then you come up with you tabulate this. How many times? All right, and how many times did this cause happen or occur? So for example, let's say after tabulating, on top of the list is poor time management, right? Not necessarily traffic, but poor time management. Let's say 80% of the respondents said that it's basically due to poor time management. And so we focus now our solution to that, which is poor time management. Are you getting this? That's how we use the Pareto chart. So, like I said, we're not really going to dive deeper into each of these tools, but we can include it in our succeeding webinars. Don't worry about that. So, in your going back to your risk management, you need to understand when and where are you going to use these risk assessment tools. Okay, what else? I just lifted this from IEC 3110. So if you notice, this is arranged alphabetically. So it doesn't mean that one is more applicable or more effective than the other. So and then you also have there, as you can see here, risk indices, risk registers. So again, these are more risk assessment techniques. Maybe others are quite new to you, like the SWIFT or the value at risk. But let's take a look at the risk register here, because risk register is very common. As you may all have risk registers in your QMS. So what is a risk register? This is basically a recording. You record all the risk in this spreadsheet. So a means of recording information about risk and tracking action. So it's also used to track the control measures or the risk treatment plans, whether it's contingency, whether it's avoidance of risk, whether you transfer the risk, and so on and so forth. So we're all familiar with the risk registers. Maybe you want to take a look at SWIFT as well, B.2.6. SWIFT, Structured What-If Technique. I think in our previous webinars, I've mentioned this, that whenever we do conduct audits, by the way, with our projects, with our clients, I have this opportunity to speak with different risk managers. And well, for me, this is just an observation, but I think the most effective risk managers are those who are whose behavior is a bit paranoid. Okay, no, I'm not kidding here. There's this certain degree of healthy paranoia that would make this risk manager always ask the question, what if? All right? And that risk manager is not aware that he's actually using the SWIFT risk assessment technique already. What if? That's the structured what if technique. What can go wrong? What if, what if, what if? What if the person or the process owner goes absent? What if the part is not available? What if the checklist is outdated? What if the document is not received, and so on and so forth? So you identify all this risk in coming up with your risk register. Okay, so you want to try that. It's a simpler form of HAZOP, which prompts of what if to identify deviations from the expected. I think I recall I shared this favorite book of mine, which I read, written by Andrew Grove, the former CEO of Intel. This book is aptly titled "Only the Paranoid Survives." So you might want to take a look at that book. It's a good risk management reference. Okay, so again, just to emphasize, there are different risk assessment techniques, or you can call it tools, that you can use in improving, in implementing your risk management within your QMS or EMS or OSH. All right, and so you can see the list here. We have the structured what if technique here. And take note that the scope for the SWIFT can be applicable across the organization, enterprise level, and department level. So you don't use SWIFT for process. Okay, you only use it for departmental level and enterprise level. So there are specific risk assessment techniques here that you use for procedures, specifically for procedures. Okay, like for example, there you look at the toxicological risk assessment. That's level 3, by the way. All right, moving on. So, are you learning from this? So, those are the risk assessment techniques or tools listed in IEC 3110, by the way. And even the standard is saying that this is not even yet an exhaustive list. Yeah? Let me repeat myself. This is not even an exhaustive list. So there are still a lot of other risk assessment techniques or tools that you can explore and you can use to further improve the effectiveness of your risk management. But as far as the guidelines are concerned, as far as ISO IEC 3110 is concerned, they have listed this. No? So by the way, this is based on ISO 3110, which is the latest version, that of 2019. They have expanded the list of these risk assessment techniques. Okay, so now that you have that matrix there, we go back here. This is the ISO 2018 standard, which is the guidelines, all right, risk management. On the second row would be your risk assessment techniques, the IEC 3110 2019, which basically contains the different assessment techniques. So this is again the guidelines, the ISO 31. So let's go back to ISO 31 just a little bit, okay? Let's go back to ISO 31. What's the framework of the ISO 31 again? This is the framework of ISO 31. Look at this. This is the framework, right? If you remember this. So now my next agenda here is this. Now that you have seen all the different risk assessment techniques, the next important question here is that where in the risk management process are you going to use those techniques? I think that's a good question to ask, right? Where in the risk management process are you going to use those, plethora of techniques? There's so many. So which one are we going to use where? All right. Now, again, let's just review this. This is the ISO 3100 process, okay? 31,000 process. So look at this. You know this already. First, of course, is you start with the scope. What's the context? What's the criteria? That's the first step. The second step, of course, is the risk assessment, okay? So the second step is the risk assessment. The one in the middle, risk assessment. And when we say risk assessment, it involves 3 steps. You identify the risk, you analyze the risk, and then you evaluate the risk. Is that clear? This is just a review. And then after you're done with the risk assessment, what's the next thing you do is you conduct your risk treatment, right? That's the next part. You treat the risk. And in our previous webinars, we were talking about the different strategies in risk treatment, whether you avoid the risk, whether you share the risk, whether you accept the risk, or you transfer the risk through insurance, and so on and so forth. So those are different strategies in risk treatment. And then, of course, your recording and reporting. Now, so here we go. Now, let's take a look at where are we going to apply those different techniques in this in this ISO 31 process, in the risk management process. I hope that's clear. Okay, so we're now going to talk about where are we going to apply those risk assessment techniques in this risk management process. Okay, now let's take a look. Okay, now you can see this. Okay, now if you might think that this looks like a bingo card or something like that, I don't blame you. Okay, because of the balls and the numbers. So, but for purposes of easy identification, I've listed here B1 to B10. So each of these elements or steps in the risk management process, let's code it from B1 to B10. Okay, now let's take a look first at scope, context, and criteria. What are techniques that we can use there? Okay, now here are the techniques again that we will lift from the previous slides. Look at that. These are techniques for eliciting views. Now, if you're just wanting to understand feedback, context, insights, comments from process owners, you may want to use brainstorming, the Delphi technique, nominal group technique, of course, interviews, and then surveys. Okay, in defining your scope, context, and your criteria. Again, where is this coming from? Clause 6 of your QMS planning. Clear? Okay, moving on. Okay, now I think, yeah, Ted is here. I will turn this over quickly to Ted. I'm almost done here. Okay, B2, look at this, B2. Let's go to risk identification. So these are the different techniques for identifying risk. All right, these are the different techniques for identifying risk. So we have checklists, FMEA or FMECA, HAZOP, scenario analysis, and then SWIFT. So you may want to use this specifically for risk identification. Take note as well that you can also use risk identification, these techniques with risk analysis. All right, so it's sort of like crossover to risk analysis from that of risk identification. Okay, moving on. Let's take a look at still on B3, right? Okay, now let's go to B4. Okay, what about this? So look at this. For risk analysis, let's take a look at the risk analysis. So you can use there the bow tie analysis, HACCP, or the LOPA. Right? So, and of course, you can also use these techniques for risk treatment, by the way. Okay, what's next? What about risk analysis? What tools can you use? Okay, for risk analysis, these are the tools that you can use. Okay, look at this. So these are the different tools that you can use for risk analysis. So now you can see that the different risk assessment techniques basically have their own applicability in the different steps of your risk management process. So you cannot just haphazardly use each one in wherever you want to use it. You need to understand the applicability of the risk assessment technique. So there you can see business impact analysis if you're trying to analyze the risk of your organization. Okay, and then let's take a look at more tools here. So what about still in risk analysis? You can try using causal mapping or cross-impact analysis. Still on risk analysis stage or step, you can also use the data protection impact analysis or value at risk or conditional value at risk. All right. So just take a snapshot of this for your reference. And then what about risk evaluation? So we all know that risk evaluation is different as well, and risk treatment. So these are the risk assessment techniques that you may want to use when you do your risk evaluation. So the Pareto Charts, where you evaluate which of these different causes actually contributes to the problem, like the tardiness example we had earlier, right? We're saying, okay, it's poor time management. So it's really about evaluation, risk evaluation, or the risk indices or reliability-centered maintenance, okay? And let's still on risk evaluation, there are more tools there that you can also use. You can also use the cost-benefit analysis. So I think someone answered the cost-benefit analysis earlier. It was the Water District of Butuan. So I would assume that you're using this for risk evaluation, right? The cost-benefit analysis, not for risk identification. So take note of that. Otherwise, you make that mistake of having only a hammer, and when you only have hammer as a tool, you basically look at all problems as a nail, which doesn't quite work that way, right? So, so you use the cost-benefit analysis there for risk evaluation. And then lastly here, we have recording and reporting. So you can also use recording for recording and reporting, this one, the risk register. So of course you migrate all the identified risk in the risk register, in your consequence likelihood matrix, or maybe in your S-curve, or maybe in your bow tie. That's why the end result always is that when we audit the risk management, what do you present? You present the risk register. So as you can see, that's the reason why, because it's used for recording and reporting. Okay, are you learning so far? I hope you were able to follow that. So in a nutshell, it looks like this. I'll turn this over to Ted right now. So in a nutshell, it looks like this. See, so how many tools, and it's all connected to your risk management steps. Okay, so now you have seen the different characteristics of risk. You have seen, the different characteristics of a risk assessment technique. You have seen the list of the different risk assessment tools or techniques. You also have understood where do you apply this risk assessment techniques to a particular step within your risk management. Now let's hear it from Ted. All right. Ted, are you there? Let's hear it from Ted. As Ted tries to enlighten us further on which of these tools that we normally typically use within our risk management. Good morning, Ted.
Good morning.
Ayan. Okay, we can hear you.
Yes. Oh, ayan. So magandang umaga sa inyo lahat. Ayan, naturuan na kayo ni Sir Jong regarding naman yung risk management and according sa 3110, di ba? So let me just share sa inyo yung aking screen. Give me a moment here.
Ted?
Yep.
Is your video on? We cannot see you.
Well, unfortunately, yung camera ko is not working.
your voice is just perfect. Go ahead, Ted.
Sige. But you can see my screen, right?
Perfect, Ted. Yes, we can see your screen. Go ahead. You have 15 minutes left.
Yes. So, simple lang to. Yung ISO 31010 actually is a guideline na tumutulong sa 31,000. So, madaling salita, kung nawawala na kayo sa pag-implement ng risk management at kung paano yung techniques na gagamitin, ito yung guideline nun. Pero ito, hindi naman niya inasabi specifically kung which technique ang gagamitin nyo. It gives you the options of what technique to use. What technique ang bagay sa inyo, depends sa inyo. Now, may basis kasi yan. Okay? Ang basis kasi niyan is yung laman ng 31,000. Ang sabi ng 31,000 kasi, kailangan na ang risk management ninyo customize sa inyo. Okay? This is clear, ha? Customize. Which means it's up to you to decide kung anong bagay sa inyo. So nobody's gonna stop you kung anong i-adapt mong technique. Now, ang problema, there are so many techniques na naka-indicate nun sa guidelines, like pinakita ni Sir Jong kanina, di ba? And marami pang ibang guides na makakatulong dyan para umayos yung risk management framework ninyo at yung process na i-adapt ninyo. Now, hopefully, syempre, kapag naintindihan ninyo yung 31,000, mabigyan kayo ng light of kung ano yung basis for a good framework. The 31,000 promotes kasi the principles of setting up a suitable framework sa inyo. And the framework na itatayuin nyo will be the basis of yung process na gagawin nyo. Yung process na pinakita kanina ni Sir Jong. Yan ang tinuturo ng 31,000. But it tells you the cycle of yung risk management process, di ba? Now, simple lang ang process ng risk management. Basic lang yung kanyang activities. Meron tayong risk identification, risk analysis, risk evaluation, tsaka risk treatment. Ito ang gist ng risk management process. Okay? Yun lang. But how to do that is actually a question of maraming organizations. They have no idea how to perform yung mga specific activities na yun. So, dito papasok yung mga guidelines. Unless you want to build your own. Okay. Simply stating, pwede kayo gumawa ng sarili nyong study o ng sarili nyong technique. Now, hindi yan masama. Kanya-kanya naman yan eh. That's why marami namang risk management officer, they create their own. Kasi, for better reasons, yung mga technique na pinopromote na nabasan nyo kanina, mahirap gamitin. Mahirap talagang intindihin. Unless experience ka na with risk management, hindi mo sila ma-apply ng mabuti. And you will end up with numbers na ang tanong mo sa sarili mo is, bakit ganyan ang lumabas? So, yun naman ang problema doon. The all-encompassing process na nire-recommend ni 31,000 includes siyempre yung the entire management of the full cycle, including yung requirements for consultation, communication, monitoring, and review, and yung better understanding of the organizational setup, yung context of the organization. So, yung activities niya simple lang. Unang trabaho, identify risk. Identifying risk isn't that complicated. Doesn't even need a special tool for that. If you want to know risk, you just understand yung historical experience mo, current events na nangyayari sa inyo, and then, dito na ngayon yung kailangang planning, isipin ninyo yung maaaring mangyayari sa inyo sa future. So this has a lot of future thinking involved with it, di ba? Kasi preemptive yan. Preventive ang risk management kasi. Diyan nga nagkaroon ng confusion yan sa ISO 9001. Because bago nag-2015, may risk management naman ng ISO 9001. It was represented in the form of preventive action. Kaya ano tinanggal yung preventive action? Inayos yun. Nilinaw kung ano yun kasi nami-misinterpret yung use. Napunta ngayon sa linaw ng risk-based thinking, which is actually the same. Okay? Para lang mas ma-align kayo sa expectation. Risk identification is knowing the risk. Listing down, knowing kung ano sila, at kung ano-ano yung mga factors na magkakaroon ng effect sa inyo na negatively impacting. Okay. After identifying yung risk, simple lang. Analyze the risk. Dito papasok yung tools and techniques na importante para sa inyo to know what is going on. How bad it is para sa inyo, di ba? Kung gaano kasakit sa inyo yan. The analysis contains understanding the entire nature of the risk, di ba? At saka kung anong areas yan nagkukos ng mga negative or probably positive, magiging opportunity yung risk, di ba? Sa creative mind ng risk management officer yan. Yan ang risk analysis. Dito mo ma-apply yung techniques na tinuturo ng 3110 kasi. Now, ultimately, the end of the assessment will give you or pave the way for evaluation. Ngayon, alam mo na yung risk, you need to make the right decisions. You now compare risk, consolidate risk, di ba? Understand which risk ang mas masama, anong hindi, prioritize risk, di ba? And ensure na mabibigyan mo ng tamang decision yan on what to do about it. O, yan ang risk evaluation. Diba, hindi naman ganun ka-complicated yan. So ultimately, the entire process for that takes only itong mga steps na yan. Dito ngayon magmamatter yung ating mga techniques na pinopromote, di ba, ng 3110. The entire point of performing yung activity ng assessment yan is masatisfy yung mga questions niyo regarding risk. Diba? Masasabi na ninyo kung ano maaaring mangyari sa inyo, paano ito mangyayari sa inyo, di ba? Gano'ng kadalas mangyayari sa inyo, and ultimately, anong balak niyong gawin dyan? Hila naman ang tanong dun eh. So may masama, anong gagawin mo ngayon dun? Dito na pupunta yung control measures, kung tatawagin natin na pretty generic term, di ba? Now, risk assessment, uses lahat yan. And it does expect you to ensure na lahat ng ginagawa nyo sa proseso nyo, sa trabaho nyo, sa operations nyo, sa activities nyo, ay ma-identify ninyo kung yan ba ay may risk, yan ba ay may opportunity na pwedeng gamitin, meron ba tayong risk na mako-convert to an opportunity, di ba? Ano ba mas masakit sa atin, anong hindi, we can prioritize, and then ultimately, ano ba limit natin pag yan ay tinrate natin? Bakit ba may limit yan? Tawag ka dyan, acceptable risk level. Hindi mo kasi absolutely matatanggal yung risk. May bababa mo lang yan to a certain degree. Di ba? Magandang ambisyon yung mawala yan, pero rare yon. Rare. Hindi mo talaga matatanggal ang risk. Kahit anong gawin mo, di ba? It will prevail. But out of the 100% harm na bibigyan sa inyo, best effort and capability ng company ninyo, may bababa mo yan to a certain degree. O ika nga, lalabanan mo yan, best effort. Turo ng 31,000 yan, di ba? Now, techniques. The techniques are actually grouped into clusters, no? According to the 3110. Pinagsasama-sama mo kung ano yung mga techniques na ang areas ng kanyang experting maituturo sa inyo at maibibigay yung resultang kailangan nyo. Yan ang laman ng 3110, di ba? So we have lookup methods, supporting methods, scenario analysis, functional control, at saka statistical methods. Kasi yung pag binasa mo yung 3110, isang listahan lang yun, halo-halo na eh. Mapapalaban ka na lang, which one ang gagamitin ko? Ito yung lugar natin yan. We have the lookup methods. My goodness, lookup, titignan mo lang kung meron o wala. Checklist ang laman. Basics ba naman itong analysis na to? Meron kang criteria, may nahanap ka, ibangga mo. O, yun lang naman yun eh. There are so many checklist founds, di ba? And they're usually used for either preliminary checks like the preliminary hazard analysis, di ba? And other any risk analysis checklist. So, magsiset ka lang ng mga criteria, tignan mo kung meron o wala. Ganun lang yun. It answers ultimately yung kailangan mo agad. Meron tayong supporting methods. Yung supporting methods. Halo-halo na yan. Ito ang pangbigay ng information na kailangan ninyo with regards to sa risk. Meron tayo dyan. Brainstorming. Interview brainstorming. Basic yan. Puntahan mo yung tao, kausapin nyo, mag-usap-usap kayo, mag-share kayo ng understanding. Yun lang ang brainstorming. Diba? Bina-brown bag nga kung easy mo sasabihin mo. Diba? Usap tayo, ano ba problema? Ganon. Yan ang brainstorming. The Delphi technique is a combination of expert opinions, diba? To support yung understanding of the source of the risk. Tapos, yun mag-i-influence ngayon nung paano nyo i-identify yung consequences o yung Delphi technique, di ba? Coming from experts yan. Ang SWIFT is yung a system to promote everybody to outright identify risk agad. Sabihin ka agad kung ano siya. Again, it's a partly combination ng brainstorming. It's linked to total risk analysis talaga. Ayan. And we have yung minention kanyo Sir Jong na yung human reliability. Naman, to evaluate human error. The entire analytical tool was meant to understand yung part naman ng human involvement dun sa inyong ginagawa. Now, we have scenario analysis. Ito common to. Common to. It's scenario-based. Diba? Situational. Studies here will tell you na kung ito nangyari, yan naman nangyari. Kasi ito mga dinaanan yan. We have yung mga famous na root cause analysis, di ba? Basic scenario analysis, toxicological risk assessment, business impact, fault tree analysis, di ba? So, andyan lahat yan. Event, cause, consequences, saka cause and effect. Common to narinig na ninyo. Which one bagay sa inyo? Nasa inyo yan. Root cause looks for the source, di ba? Iba-iba pa nga ang methods na root cause analysis eh. Ang dami pa yan, marami yan eh. Scenario identifies it through imagination and extrapolation of the present and the different risks, di ba? Assuming yung scenario nag-occur. Ang toxicological naman is analysis of the pathways kung saan yung target will be exposed to the hazard. Yun naman yun, di ba? Ang business impact to understand kung ang inyong mga pinapatakbo ay hindi na tumatakbo at nadidisrupt. Gaano kasama sa inyo yan? Fault tree, syempre, branches out kung ano yung mga ways kung saan yung risk na yan ay napupunta o sa nanggagaling. Ganon din naman ang event tree with inductive reasoning. Kanya-kanyang approach naman yan. You can actually combine itong mga iba-ibang techniques into one, di ba? Parang yung cause and consequence analysis. A combination of fault tree and event tree yun. Including time dilation. Ayan. And we have the standard cause and effect analysis, di ba? Yung effect, and then malalaman natin based on categories, di ba, na nagko-contribute sa factor nun kung ano pinanggalingan nun. Diyan lang gagaling syempre yung parang fishbone diagram kung iisipin natin. We have functional analysis. Ito. Marami nang gumagamit dyan. Minention ni Sir Jong yung FIMEA dyan. Nandiyan dyan yung FIMEA, di ba? Andyan yung reliability centered, the maintenance, sneak circuit analysis. Maganda yung sneak di ba? Sneaky yun hazard at saka HACCP. O alam na ninyo, di ba, yung HACCP mostly yan para sa identification sa food safety. But it can be applied to any safety requirements of organization, di ba? Ang sneak circuit, maganda yan. Kasi ang hinahanap niyan is yung mga talagang unexpected. Yung mga out of nowhere nangyari. Poof! Ba't nangyari? Wala naman nangyayari masama. Yun, di ba? Kaya sneak circuit analysis yan Diba? So ito ang mga sample ng functional. And then we have syempre yung control assessment. I mention din ni Sir John kanina yung LOPA, di ba? At saka yung bow tie. Yung bow tie, combination yan ng mga event tree coming from yung gitna ng bow tie na yun, yung source of the event, di ba? So these are control assessments to determine yung effectivity ng mga controls at kung ano man nangyari kung yung mga controls na yun ay hindi tumatakbo ng mahusay. So ginugrupo yan, depende kung anong hinahanap mo o anong areas ng inyong opisina ang gusto nyo tignan for the risk. That is how the 31,000 actually, 3110, na prescribes yung mga controls niya. And then we have syempre statistical analysis. Well, statistical analysis is purely math. Diba? Ang problema with most organizations, ayaw mag-formulation. But the analysis methods here are based on derivatives, diba? Based on computational variations of situation, diba? Parang yung Pareto, di ba? Number scaling yan, yung number study yan And you have to have the right formula in order to achieve the right expectation ng study. Mali formula mo, mali bibigay sa information, mali magiging decision mo. Which one works for you? You need to understand first the formulation kung bagay sa inyo hindi. Hindi nyo maintindihan mo yung gagamitin. It's gonna go nowhere actually. So, yan ang may tutulong ng 3110 sa inyo, di ba? Para may basis kayo for the right decisions regarding risk. Tells you objectively kung ano talaga yung mga risk at mga potential niya to harm. Gives you the opportunity or to address the capability to treat the risk, di ba? Gives you itong parte ng evaluation to prioritize it ng tama, di ba? And ultimately to meet your requirements of the organization and any regulatory o legal requirements ninyo. So yan ang may tutulong ng 31N, di ba? So basically, it's a guideline. It's not certifiable. Nobody here will say na ang 3110 was intended for certification kasi hindi siya intended for certification. It was meant to be a guideline para sa 3100. Any questions regarding 3110? Baka humaba tayo Maraming techniques and you have to decide which ones bagay sa inyo. You can combine any one na tingin ninyo kaya nyo i-combine, di ba? Or you can create your own. This is entirely the point of the 31,000 family. That's entirely yung tinuturo niya sa inyo. Ayan.
Alright.
Sir Jong. Yes.
Maraming salamat, Sir Ted. Alam niyo si Ted ngayon is in a live training in a separate room. So we just have to
may exercise ako sa kabila
Gagambalain pa at salamat. I'll see you again next Friday. Salamat.
Yes. Salamat din.
Alright, so there you go. And I think that one is a very specific, napakalinaw na instruction na pinakita sa atin ni Sir Ted kanina. And I sure hope that that will improve your understanding of these many different techniques pagdating po sa risk assessment. And this will certainly, of course, the objective here is to help you improve your quality management system, specifically on the risk management side of it. Diba? Doon sa clause 6, which is the actions to address risks and opportunities. And if you'd like to know more about our training programs, go to our Facebook. Our schedule is listed there. We would love to see you in one of our full-blown training courses. Do us a small favor. Please go to our YouTube channel. Feel free to subscribe. And please share this with your team, your organization. We'd also like them to be part of this program. Help us grow this very small advocacy that we're starting here at AGF. And we also have video tutorials there. So I think that's all for today. We just ran out of time, so sorry about the questions. Maybe feel free to email it to us, or maybe we can take care of that next week. So stay safe, stay tuned, stay to this program. And like I said, please help us grow this small advocacy by sharing this with your ISO team and your organization. On behalf of AGF Consulting Group, this has been John Fernandez. It's a beautiful Friday. I wish you the best weekend. All the best. Thank you, Paul, and see you next week. Thank you so much.